Welcome back to Money 911, where we deliver the vital solutions to unlock your healthiest wealth and happiest life. I'm your host, Chris Miller, and today we're about to enter a groundbreaking conversation. What if the key to your financial resilience, sharpest decision-making, and unstoppable leadership wasn't just strategy or hustle, but your brain? My guest, Dr. Patrick K. Porter, is a visionary behind BrainTap, a world leader in neuroplasticity and brain wellness. Together, we'll explore how you can reprogram your mind for success, boost mental clarity, and build your brain that not only survives stress, but thrives through it. So buckle up. This is not just inspiration, it's operation for your best self. All right. Welcome, Dr. Porter. It's an honor to have you here with us today on Money 911.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, you've really dedicated your life to showing our brains they're more adaptable than we ever imagined. For the listeners, a lot of people are feeling stuck in old patterns, financial fears. And what would be the first shift that they could focus on in rewriting their minds?
Well, I think the first shift is to get moving. A lot of people, when they get into these states of depression or anxiety or fear, they stop moving. Of course, we have the fight or flight response, but there's also the freeze response. That creates procrastination. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon in the body, but your body, just like every cell, is either in growth mode or in protection mode. So when you're in protection mode, you can't learn, grow, and discover. You become more of a reactionary thinker. And there's not very many successful people that are reactionary. They take action. They see a goal and they go after it. But I mean, we're all going to have setbacks. It's how do you handle that setback? And part of it is to go outside yourself to see, and also to take responsibility that you put yourself in that situation. Your best thinking brought you to whatever's happening to you right now. So how can you upgrade your thinking? And of course, our brain being the way that we process our thoughts, it's not us, but it's a processor of thoughts. If we can get more creative about it and look for spontaneous breakthroughs, because there are solutions. You can't have a problem without a solution. Most people don't understand that. You also have solutions with problems. So those people, there's a reason they call it wisdom. In ancient times, they call it the wise dome. You look at problems with a 360-degree angle. So if you can start thinking that way, and that means taking time for yourself, settling down, calming down, whether you use technology like ours or you use some kind of mindfulness practice, the most successful people will take time, even it's while they're drinking their coffee or they go outside, they take a walk, get out in nature, something to liberate your mind, because it's kind of like you can't have the gas and the brake pedal at the same time mashing down. You gotta undo one of those. And I think the nervous system acts the same way. It's very, what we find when we measure people's brains and those people that are in those stuck states, they're in a high sympathetic, we call it neurological lock. And so that's why a good cry sometimes will do it, or a good laugh, go to a movie, go out with friends, do something that's actually mindless. And then your brain comes up with a solution to your problem because you've liberated this 100 billion neural processor. So I think the first thing is physical activity. And today, most people don't realize that they've now said that 20 minutes of setting is equivalency of smoking a cigarette on your health. So, if you're sitting there trying to solve your problem, you'll notice in a lot of the books about the geniuses, they would either do cat naps or they would go for a walk. There was some way they would get inspiration through movement or through contemplation.
Cat naps. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of people that have this, that it's something that's imposed upon them. Like, they're locked in a house, or they're this is happening, that people don't really realize how much of an effect that they have in creating the world in which we live, right? There's so much connection there, but it's been broken from, our reality, right?
Right. if we can look at our problems as if they are training grounds for our superpowers,
Right.
Anybody who's ever accomplished something, they realize now you have a skill. And if you can really look back at your life, you've had to overcome a lot of problems. And there's a systematic way that you solve those problems. And if you can just reach back and find out what was the skill set you used, because if you look at life as happening through you instead of to you, you're going to be much healthier. When you look at life as something that happens to you, that's a very pessimistic view. Like you can't be happy unless somebody praises you or pays you a check or does this other things. But if you can find status, in fact, they've even shown studies that the more of service you are to people, the healthier you are, because you get a neurological benefit for that. So when you think about life comes through you, then you realize, hey, this is a gift. What is this problem? And I had one of my first mentors, and he was a very successful entrepreneur. His system of software back in the 80s actually was in 98% of all the banks in the world. And he was a salesperson. He told me, Patrick, you're going to go broke. He says, you don't know how to sell because you're selling. He said, you've got to listen and solve their problems. And I think that a lot of people have to do that within themselves. Don't look at there's a problem outside yourself. If there's a problem happening outside you, it's not outside you. Nothing is actually happening outside you. Our senses bring it into our brain, into our conscious awareness, and then we get to deal with it. So, one person's problem is another person's solution. So if something's happening in your life right now that's a problem, you look at it and say, wow, how did I get myself into this? You backtrack and find out. Then you rewrite history. The most important thing, in Richard Bandler, one of my first teachers in NLP, he said, everyone should have multiple pasts. Because if you dwell on the past as if it's fixed, it's not fixed. You've distorted, deleted, and changed those experiences to support your current belief system. So why don't we change, distort, and delete it to support our future, what we want to have? So if you could learn from those experiences, knowing that the subconscious, which runs 95% of our biological system, our conscious mind doesn't do it. If we can change that past, we're never going to forget the real past. But if we can change it in a way that says, hey, I said this wrong, I did this wrong, I made this up, maybe I got angry, got upset, you had a negative emotional outburst. These are natural things for human beings. But the unnatural thing is to dwell on them. That's why they say to have a childlike mind. If I've had children and grandchildren now, and you see them, they get in a fight, and the parents keep fighting for the next 2 days, but the kids are back playing together because they have short memories. So we should have short memories for our defaults and long-term memories for our positive experiences. And we'll find that life will become better because that's the perceptual filter. I mean, I use it as an example is when you first buy a car. When you buy that car, most people think it's the only car like it. They found the unique car that's going to be theirs, and they drive it off a lot, and they start seeing them everywhere because now it's part of their prevailing awareness. The same thing's true when you start positive thinking. You start seeing positive, and we call it frequency because we are what we frequently see. So think about frequency in that way. So if you're a high frequency person, you see high frequency opportunities, you seek out high frequency experiences, you eat high frequency foods, you take action in high frequency opportunities. If you're low frequency, then the opposite happens, right? You hang out with low frequency people, you blame and shame and you doubt. And so it's all about changing your frequency. And it really is about mindset. If you don't have the right mindset, that's why there's only so many entrepreneurs. Everybody wants somebody to take care of them. If you've chosen to be an entrepreneur, you chose this stress. So embrace it and build more capacity. I always tell people, you don't want to get rid of your stress. I mean, the only time you have no stress is when you're dead. So if you want no stress, it'll happen sooner or later. But until that happens, you want stress. You want to be adaptive. We have an adaptive nervous system. We have adaptive thoughts. We're all precognitive. We're all predicting the future. It's just some of us know we're predicting the future and others are surprised when it happens. When Deepak Chopra said 97% of what's going to happen today, you knew about yesterday. So what are you pretending not to know? It's only 3% that's ever different. So change that 97%. You can't change that 3% because it might be fixed. It's kind of like our genetics. 1% is fixed, 99% is changing every 40 seconds. You are changing every 40 seconds. So the thing is, you can never be the same, but you can try. I call them the dragons of the past, by the way, because people try to drag their past on and on. So it's a drag on, so they keep dragging it on. They introduce themselves they tell people about their faults. They tell about their limitations. And this anchors it into your nervous system. And then it keeps showing up. So think about what you're doing consistently that's giving you results, amplify those things that aren't giving you results. Think about How is this a lesson for me to learn from? And how can I retrain my brain and body to do something different? And even if it's wrong, something different is going to be better than what you've always got. So in your body will keep adapting. And if you have a mindset to overcome, because you have the skill set, you wouldn't be presented a problem if you didn't have a solution. You have to keep that in mind. So, sometimes, in the wisdom of AA, they always say, change the things you can and, be grateful for the things that you can't change, but there are a lot of things we can change, especially if you're an entrepreneur, because you control your hours, you control who you deal with, you control how much money you can make. If you work for somebody else, that's all limits. Those are all limits. You have to be there at 9:00. You have to leave at 6:00. You have to take your breaks when they want to do it. But you're an entrepreneur. You get a lot more flexibility that can bring a lot of joy if you do it correctly, or it can bring a lot of angst. You can amplify your stress.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good. Many of my listeners, they keep, everybody's pushing really hard right now, sacrificing sleep, peace of mind, emotional balance for success. How much does that damage the brain's performance, and what can they practically do today to reverse that?
Right. Well, first of all, your biggest asset is not your business, not the money you have in your bank account. It could be your family, but most importantly, it's you. If you don't have you as healthy. So I always tell people, think about the airplanes. They don't say run around putting everybody else's air mask on for oxygen. They say put it on yourself. So I always when you take care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually, you can handle more. In fact, we did a study ourselves. We did it with Googlers and Microsoft programmers. We showed them if they took 20 minutes off in the middle of the afternoon, this is when we have a biological downshift in our temperature. We actually lose 2 degrees. At night, we gain 2 degrees at 2:00. This is just a natural biological rhythm. And people think they need coffee, tea, or sugar. No, we need energy. And how we get energy is by stopping, reflecting. Of course, we use brain tap, but there's other ways you can do it. But you have to take that time. We showed them if they took a 20-minute break in the middle of the afternoon, they actually got 26% more work done. Their happiness score improved 54%. So people think they're too busy to do these things. 26% more work. That means in a work week, they got a day and a quarter by taking that 20-minute break. So then think about how many bad decisions you make. If being a psychologist, when somebody's coming to me, if they were going through a divorce, getting a job shift, doing these things, I'd say never make any life-changing decisions right now. Just status quo, because you can't make good decisions if you're stressed. Well, some people live their whole life like that every day, and they think I'm too busy to do these things. You're never too busy to take care of yourself. So number one, eat right. You can't outthink a bad diet. And sugar is probably the worst neurotoxin for the brain. So eliminate as much sugar as you can. Get essential omega-3s and 6s, because this is going to feed your brain. Drink half your body's weight in ounces of water. These are just simple things that you do. And then number two, move and breathe. If you don't move and breathe, your nervous system will shut down. You'll have depression, anxiety, and worry. Just getting up and moving, get out in sunshine. These are things that we need to do. They're not optional. These are essential things. And then number three, you have to do something to keep your brain focused. And that's why when I invented the brain tap, it's about building capacity to handle stress. We have a technology problem in the world today. Nobody's going to get rid of their phones, their big screen televisions, all their technology. So we have to have a technology solution that can be scaled and taken across the world. So that's why I created it, because we need something. Nobody has 4 hours to take a nap in the middle of the afternoon, but you can take a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute break and reboot your brain and get it ready to go again. And there's a lot of biological things we could talk about that happens because of that. But the main thing is energy. We live in an energy economy. We only have so much energy. So if you just rely on your old behaviors or coffee, you're going to burn out. And the problem is you're going to burn out before you know it, because the signs of burnout, a lot of people have denial. One of my favorite people in the world ran a supplement company. She thought she ate healthy, but she only slept 2 to 3 hours a night. She died of cancer. I told her 2 years before that, because I measured it on our neurocheck, and I said, Nancy, you've got a black brain. You have no energy. She goes, but I'm a nutritionist. I eat healthy. Eating healthy is not the solution. It's only part of the solution. She wasn't moving and breathing. She wasn't sleeping. Sleeping is when you incubate those superpowers. So whatever you can do as an entrepreneur to get at least 6.5 hours sleep. The lie of 8 hours it's a myth. What we need is 6.5 hours, 1 hour of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep. And if you're not measuring that as an entrepreneur, you're missing out on an opportunity. You can get things like the Ring, the Aura Ring, the Whoop Watch, iWatch. Wear that and start measuring your sleep at least 3 nights a week to find out if you're getting that 1 hour of deep sleep. That's when your brain detoxes. So all that stress builds, and somebody says, I have foggy brain, I can't think. Well, it's because you didn't sleep. So that's the number one thing that we help people with is sleeping. So when you think about improving sleep function, that's going to improve everything. And I know everybody listening has had that day where you woke up and you had a great night's sleep and you felt like you could take on the world. Well, that should be every morning. I mean, you have a mission. You're an entrepreneur. You have a goal to change the world. Without whatever you're doing, that's your mission. That's your passion. You are the resource. So you have to treat yourself as the golden goose. You can't kill the golden goose. You get no more eggs. So you've got to get that golden goose healthy and vibrant and dynamic.
That's great. I just met you at a big event and you had this amazing, that's what got me interested because when I was young, I was studying music sound for healing. And I was very, really, going in that direction and then life took a right turn. But with that, when I met you, you have this really cool device called Brain Tap, which I did get to use. And it, why don't you go ahead and share what that is? I wouldn't even try to explain it, but it was amazing. Right?
Yeah, over the years, we started with sound alone. My dad was an instructor called the Silva method, and we used something called the Silva sound. Right. And this was back in the 70s. So this sound would actually synchronize your hemispheres and get you into alpha. Now, for those that don't know, alpha is that creative, intuitive state where when you're working the garden or you're hanging out with friends you love, you get in that state. Now, what we know now is these brainwaves actually create neurotransmitters. So you create more acetylcholine. This is the feel-good, happy kind of feeling. Most people hang out in beta. That's where dopamine is. And dopamine can be a bad thing and it can be a good thing because it motivates you to do something. But with dopamine, the beta brain, you don't get a payoff. That's why if somebody says, why am I addicted to this? Why? Because there's no payoff in that. We need to have delayed gratification in that category. But when we drop into theta, so with Brain Tap, we found we could get to alpha with sound, but to get to theta, most adults are missing this brainwave. It's a very short window between being awake and being asleep. Everyone listening has had this experience at some point in their life. They're waking up and they hear a song. That song sticks in their mind for the whole rest of the day. They call it an earwig because then they can't get it out until they go to sleep the next night. They wake up and it's gone because they heard it in a state of theta. This is a state of hypermnesia, super memory. It's very difficult for people to get into. They say if you go to a mountaintop, you're at 7.8 hertz frequency, that happens to be theta. So when people say I had a mountaintop experience, that's because theta is associated with something called GABA. GABA is a precursor to something called DMT. DMT is in every cell of your body. And then when people have these spiritual experiences, they have a large amount of DMT in their body. So regardless of what's happening. So when people say that just metaphorically, it's true when you get into that state. But most adults are missing it, and that's why they're not sleeping. Because when you sleep, you have to go through these brain waves and you cycle through them all through the night. What we've done with Brain Tap is we found a way using light, and this is retinal flashing. So when you say about the visor, you put the visor down, your eyes are closed, and there's actually the scientific way we do it is it's cranial nerve 2. It's not the way we see, but it's think of in caveman days, when you're laying on the ground, you get that flash of light that tells you it's daylight, you're going to jump up because now you're part of the food chain. Now that's still registered in our biology. Right. So what happens is when we're wearing these, we've isolated the right and left eye because your right eye is being processed by your left brain and your left eye is processed by your right brain. And so what happens when we're under stress is one brain will actually shut down unless we train it. And this happens to everybody. And there's a little exercise. I usually have people stand up and I have them do a circle with their foot in the air and write their name. And some people will forget how to write their name because they'll do the circle because that's a right brain function. Writing your name is a left brain function. And you'll find out by doing that exercise, are you right brained or left brain? You can also clasp your hands and see what thumb's on top. Because if like in my case, my right thumb's on top, that means I'm more left brain, more logical, more linear, even though I'm an artist, but I've worked hard to get my left brain engaged, from being a youngster. Uh-huh. But the problem is in our world today, we become one brain dominant. So with brain tap using light, sound, and vibration, think about getting twice the computing power to solve problems, twice the capacity to handle stress, twice the ability to be creative and problem solving. This is so with brain tap. We focus a lot on medical things because we have over 3,000 clinics using it, but we also have a whole track to do with entrepreneurship. The people at Think and Grow Rich, the Napoleon Hill Foundation, I did a whole 17 series for them based on that book, because it's when you read a book, it becomes knowledge, but there's a difference between knowledge and transcendence. Transcendence is applied knowledge. You don't know how you know it, but you know it. It's kind of like, how do you know your name? I don't know. I just know my name. That's because it's transcended the knowledge part of the brain and went into it's just part of your nature. You know it. So when you want to learn something at a transcendent state, then it becomes available anywhere at any time. It's not state dependent. It's not, a lot of us are really good at book learning. And then after the test is over, our brain flushes it out. So we want to get that embedded into us. Now, when we do this, we have different series. It's called neuroplasticity. And something happens to our brain as we age. Most people aren't aware of this, but when we were born and we wonder, how does a kid, and I have grandkids now, so I wasn't really present for my kids. I was there, but I didn't really notice all these things. But when my grandkids, they went from being little kids to being talking, walking adult people, but they were only 2 years old, and I'm going, wow, how did they do that? It was because their brain was running at 18.1 volts. Almost every brain does that. By the time we're 21 to 27 years old, that brain drops to 10.1 volts.
Wow.
If we let that brain energy drop below 6, we have dementia. If it drops below 4, we'll start having Alzheimer's symptoms. Now, most people don't realize we need to train the brain. So that's why we brought light into the equation. There are studies that show light, when it enters into the bloodstream, we know this is true. It happens even with sunlight. The hemoglobin will absorb this light energy, circulate to the cells that are dying. They call it apoptosis in science. If this light energy can get there before that cell dies, that cell will absorb that energy into the cell and start making something called ATP. So if you can imagine with me, you have a cell, and in the middle of that cell, there's a little guy running their hand around in a circle. And every time it goes around in a circle, it spits out an ATP molecule. When you enter light therapy into it, every time it spins, it spits out 32. So we've shown that we can improve that. Our dementia study actually reversed everyone on the dementia scale, and it's in a bigger study now at Seminole College in Florida, which they actually put a webpage together about it, because every person in the study before the 6th week no longer has dementia symptoms. Now, we can't diagnose them, but we can say, hey, you don't have the symptoms anymore, because our medical world says, hey, you've got a diagnosis, and then they label you. The reality is that every one of us has a system called the DNA system of the body. We all know about it because they said we have 1%. They mapped the human genome in 2003, and they said 99% of that was junk DNA. Well, in 2018, they did another study, and they say, hey, we made a mistake. It's not junk DNA. That DNA is changing every 40 seconds. It's either upregulating or downregulating gene function. And the biggest thing it's based on is, do you look at life as a pessimist or an optimist? If you look at life as a pessimist, you're actually producing 200 times more light energy in the cell, and that's ATP. So if somebody tells me, what's the best thing I can do to live longer? Change your thinking, because they've actually shown 6.5 years more. Of course, you can't outthink a bad diet, as I said earlier. So if you can combine these things I'm talking about and have an optimistic outlook on life, your body is going to function better, because our biological system isn't just what we see. Like I'm looking at you on the screen. This is only the form I see, but you're emitting 8-10 nanometer light. You're emitting light from your body. And I always tell people, don't believe me, go to the NIH website, type in biosphere. They had said in 1994, this isn't something recent. In 1994, they said, we have a field of energy around us.
Right.
All illness starts in the field. So it's our thoughts. We're projecting these thoughts out into our field, and they can actually weigh and measure them now. It sounds metaphysical. It is metaphysical because we're metaphysical. We're not just physical beings. We're beings actually of light and energy and resources. And we can change that frequency of light by the way we think in our mind and through our bodies.
Yeah, definitely. Like neuroplasticity, right? It's a secret weapon for leaders.
Right.
Maybe share a real life story of someone that's been transformed with brain habits
I
and
just
thought,
interviewed a person actually for the Brain Fitness podcast
uh,
where he was told he was permanently disabled. He couldn't speak. He got in an accident. His brain was damaged. They said, "There's nothing we can do for you."
hmm,
Well, for 3 years, he believed them. But then he decided he was going to start doing something different. He found out about brain tap. Now he did also methylene blue, which is a product that they now know when you ingest it, it actually is light activated. So if you take this at the same time you're doing brain tap, it adds more energy. It actually spins up more energy at the cellular level because it's all about an energy equation. When I was speaking to him, I said, "How long ago did this happen?" Because he sounded perfectly, talked perfectly. He says, "Yeah, my doctors can't believe it. They said it's not what I'm doing though. My body just healed." And we had one woman that came into the office and she asked her doctor, "Hey, would it be okay if I did this?" He said, "Well, it's not going to help you, but you can go ahead and do it." And she was scheduled for open heart surgery, but she had one valve that needed to be replaced and another one was leaking. They said, "We don't think we can do the surgery because you won't make it." Well, 6 months later, she went back to him, got the checkup, and he said, "I don't know what you're doing, but the valve that was weak is now totally healed, and the one that was needing to be replaced seems like it's working, functioning perfectly."
wow.
And she said, "Do you think it's the light therapy?" He said, "No, I don't think it's that, but it could be something else." And so light energy is the answer. Now, how do you get that energy? Of course, we taught her to change her diet too, because you can't keep eating junk food. And we taught her to, as much as you can, move. She couldn't move that much. She'd get tired walking across the room.
Mm.
So we told her at first, just walk around the house a little bit. When you get tired, sit back down.
Right.
And then, we said, we got to work on your sleep. She wasn't sleeping because her body was afraid, when you're in pain. So, I mean, if people go online, just type in #BrainTap, they're going to see literally thousands. We have a lot of professional athletes using it, especially boxers. We have four of the world champions use brain tap. If they watch the Super Bowl, the two Super Bowl quarterbacks use brain tap.
What?
And so you don't have to use it. You don't have to use it for problems either. You can use it to just enhance what you're doing. And we have so many people that, we have a golf program. People go, "I can't believe it. I'm using this now. I won my club championship." Because golf, of course, is a 4-hour game that takes 5 minutes. Because if you really think about, you're just swinging that club for a few seconds, but you're walking between holes. And if you talk yourself out of the next shot, you're gonna do terribly. So it's a mind game. So, and I think all of life is like that. And we've had story after story like that, because when it all starts with your thinking.
Yeah.
If you don't change your thinking, if somebody has cancer, for instance, and I'm not saying we cure cancer by any stretch, but if you have cancer and you get it treated, if you don't change your thinking about the cancer, it's going to return.
Yeah.
Because it's a cellular dysfunction, and that all starts with your brain. When somebody says, even pain, for instance, the reason when we created the first brain tap was called the MC square, because I like Einstein. And it's actually on the cover of my first book, Awaken the Genius. But in this, when we think about what's going on, we have to think about how energy plays a role in all this. If you're a low energy, first thing we got to do is raise that energy. And the brain is the best way. And when somebody says, "I got an ache in my bones," we developed this equipment because we were using biofeedback. We didn't have neurofeedback back then. Somebody asked, "Did you take neurofeedback training?" There was no neurofeedback when I went to school. It was biofeedback.
Right.
So, but what we were doing is, we know if your hands are warm and you're deep breathing, belly breathing, you will not have pain, because you only have pain in the beta brainwave.
Mm.
If we can get you out of high beta brainwaves, that's stress, anxiety, and fear, you won't have pain in the body. So what we found out was, and we were using candles. So think about a candle flickering. And somebody says, "Why did you use a candle?" Well, candles flicker at 10 hertz frequency. So when you're looking at them, there's something called frequency following response. So we use that. So what we have so many people that we worked with, they couldn't have surgery because they couldn't have the anesthetic. So we teach them. I went through painless surgery myself. My shoulder surgery was done with nothing but my brain. Because we can put ourselves into a state, what we call a state of abeyance, where we don't have to feel pain in our body. Pain is optional. But if you don't work on your brain, it's not optional, because the signals of the nervous system, it's basically a signal telling you there's something wrong. If you know something's wrong, you deal with it. But sometimes you even fix the problem, but the signal stays. They call that phantom pain.
Right.
That's because it's a psychological pain, not always a physical pain. So we work from things like that to helping athletes, and Tom Brady's group, the TBRX team, they use it when they do therapy. So while they're doing therapy with people wear the brain tap, because if you change the body's posture and you get them to stretch and you're using light therapy, that neuroplasticity you're talking about, and neuroplasticity is really your body's capacity to work. So the more energy you have in the brain, the more it's neuroplastic, which means it can have more neural pathways. So think if you have only one solution, you have a phobia. You have two solutions, you have a dilemma. But if you have three choices, if you have three, you have choices. So we work better if we have choices, right? So we want to keep our brain expanding. And I think one of the biggest things too is never think you have the solution. There could be a better solution. A friend might tell it to you. You might see it on a television show. You might read it in a book, but be open to other possibilities. Those people that have limited possibility thinking, they're in trouble because we were living in a very fast-paced world and solutions come just as fast as problems. But if we're only focusing on the problems, we miss those solutions.
Absolutely. Boom. Perfect. Your upcoming book, Brain Fitness Blueprint, it sounds like a treasure chest of tools.
Yes.
Maybe give us one little breakthrough idea from the book that you think everybody needs to hear.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is that your past is real. Mm-hmm. Your past is not real. Anybody in psychology would tell you distorted, deleted, and changed it. But most people are never trained how to do that. So if we look at a negative memory and it's in color, the first thing we need to do is make it black and white. Mm. Most people, when you're in a positive memory, you want to live it, you want to breathe it, you want to be a part of it, you want to amplify those. But negative memories, we want to step out of it. See it for what it is. It's a past experience. Put it into a picture frame. Put it behind you, because until you get that thinking out, we call it stinking thinking, right? There's a saying for it. That thinking it's kind of like bad food in the refrigerator. We want to clean it out, but we just keep waiting until a friend comes over. Then we finally get that thinking. We finally get it out. So think about the refrigerator. You have something. We went out to dinner. We were talking. We didn't eat all the food, so you took it home, but you didn't remember it. It got stuck to the back of the refrigerator. As it starts thinking, you might pull that out of the refrigerator, and you look at it. It's green and fuzzy. What do you do with it, Chris?
Throw it away.
That's right. You don't send it off to CSI. You don't blame mom and dad. No. These are what your memories are. Yeah. Your past is like those old leftovers. Right. You can't get even. There's no reason to do it. And if you're giving away your power, I always say to people, one of the things in the book is I tell people, we all have a remote control. We all have that person that can get under our skin. They know exactly what to say, how to look. They don't give me that look, but we give them that remote control. And when my kids were younger, I used to tell them that. And of course, every once in a while, you're going to get angry. I remember on a camping trip, my daughter go, Dad, you gave me your remote control, because I got angry about something, and so we're all going to get caught on that. But if we know our triggers, that's a blessing. Right. It's the people that don't know they have triggers. If you know your triggers, you can disable them. You can take the energy off that trigger. If you don't like that light switch, take it off the wall. Don't let people, and so a lot of people are running around. They don't know what to do. They don't know when to be happy or whatever, because they've given all their triggers to external resources. And so in the book, it talks about, this is part of what we call we want to do neural pruning. That was what the first thing was. We want to do some neural pruning, get rid of those thoughts that don't work for us. There's also neurogenesis. We can't rebuild. If we destroyed brain cells, don't worry about what you did in the past. Your brain can rebuild at any age. This neurogenesis happens when we have a spark of an idea, when we get that eureka moment. We're actually building new neural pathways. That's why we get a rush of energy down through our body. Mm-hmm. Our brain just wired ourselves. And one of the things I love about neuroscience is they prove that if we get one new thought, my goal every day is to get one new thought in my brain, because they've proven if you get one new thought, the whole brain has to rewire. And think about a computer. When you defrag a computer, that's what's happening. When you get that one new thought, it has to defrag. So everything in your universe has to shift and change and have a cascading event around that one experience. So if you get that one solution, you get that one encounter, read that one book, listen to that one podcast, whatever it is, that's going to change and rewire the brain. But if you're stuck in old thinking, in the Bible, it says you can't put new wine in old wineskins. And this is an example of our brain. You can't put new thoughts into old beliefs. You have to create new beliefs. That's the wineskin. So what are the new beliefs? What do you think about yourself? You don't have the right to let other people dictate who you are. And a lot of times we don't know that because nobody trained us. growing up, we learned that's why the Benedictine monk said, give me a child to their 7 and I'll give you a Catholic for life. Because we form these beliefs, and sometimes the beliefs work. I mean, if they're working for you, save them, amplify them. But if these beliefs aren't working for you, it's time to make a change. And sometimes that change takes energy. Mm-hmm. That's why things like brain tap and eating right and exercising, all these things give you the energy to face the day, because today is your Super Bowl. It's not tomorrow. It's not yesterday. You can change today. We can't change the future. We can't change the past, but we can change our physiological effects right now, and we can choose to be happy. Even though it's a simple saying, you can choose to be miserable or you can choose to be happy. The stories they told about the prisoners of war. They did a whole study about the prisoners that they came out no problems because they all got together and played golf every day. But they played it in their mind, so they gave themselves something to do. They didn't dwell on the problem state. They created a solution state, even though they were in the worst conditions imaginable.
Yeah.
They call it the Noi prison or something like that. So when you think about what's going on with you, how are you thinking about you?
Right.
And when you think about you, you've been imbued with intelligence. You've been imbued with creativity. You've been imbued with motivation. So think about how you're going to use that. But if you don't think about the future, one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to predict the future, create it.
Yeah, exactly.
So many things. So, and we call this in the book neuropruning. A brain priming. So you have to see it in your brain before you can see it in the world.
Yeah.
Because if not, we all have blind spots and we won't see it, even if the opportunity's there. You won't see it. I could tell you story after story about people that I've known that had great opportunities, and somebody listening might have been told, "Hey, Apple just started. They're doing a raise. You can invest, $20,000. Where would they be today?" But they thought, "Oh, that's a crazy idea. I don't want to do it." And so these opportunities come up all the time. It's not just a once in a lifetime. There's always like once in a lifetime, like Apple, but there's little victories we can have along the way.
Exactly. You've worked with thousands globally. What kind of patterns do you see the most successful leaders? How do they manage the mental clarity or the stress? What's similar?
I think the biggest thing is they don't make quick judgments, but they make quick decisions. Mm. So a lot of people and the best leaders I know don't think they know everything.
Right.
They listen. Like my dad told me when I first got into practice, he said, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk. So these leaders will listen a lot before they speak. And I think it's one of those things, like even in Stephen Covey's book, he said, seek to understand before you want to be understood. So I want to understand your situation. Now I can make a decision. Now I can make a choice. But if I think I know it, the worst problem is people think they know. And I see when I meet I got a chance to meet with the health ministers of India. They didn't say a word till I was done doing my talk. Then they asked me a lot of questions, and they immediately picked up the phone and said, "We need to get this into the schools. We need to." And they knew it because they didn't just make a decision that this was some crazy thing. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so many people think they know something, and they don't really know it. We all only know what we know, and there's a lot of geniuses out there that don't know they're geniuses because nobody's listened to them. So if you're a business person and you listen to that person, you might get that great idea from that person. You wouldn't even believe it, but they have that opportunity for you.
Yeah. Well, tell everybody really about the brain tap and how they can get it and how they can connect with you.
Right. We can share a link, they can go to braintap.com and they can download a free 14-day trial, because the best thing is to try it on yourself. And I always tell people, with 2/3 of the world not sleeping, that's a good test. 90% of the people that will download that app within 14 days will start having their best night's sleep, even without the headset. So then you can look at the headset. The headset, again, uses retinal flashing in ear. But the first step is to get you educated. Now, the nice thing is when you do that 14-day trial, you also get to download my book, Thrive in Overdrive. It's a real book. It's not an ebook. And we give you that whole book because I can't share enough here to tell you. In today's world, everybody's going 100 miles an hour. But what I did is I talked about, that's why I call it Thrive in Overdrive, because everybody's in overdrive and you need to have little tips that take you there. We talk about diet, we talk about movement, we talk about brain fitness, and we talk about doing it with and without brain tap. So, but I always encourage people, don't make a decision till you download the free app. We don't even charge you to the 14th day. If you don't like it, just cancel it. Now, what I can tell the listeners in our research, and we have 120,000 users right now, is that in that 14-day trial, 70% of people will buy it. And we only have about 7% of the people ever stop. So they're using it. Our average user uses it 28 times a month. So it's not something you have to do every day, although you could do it every day. And we have morning sessions. So the morning sessions actually wake up the brain. We call this SMR. That's the brain wave that as we get older and better looking with age, that's the one that atrophies. So we need to work on that in the morning. We call it digital coffee. It wakes up the brain. It creates more cortisol, dopamine, and norepinephrine. This is what wakes up the brain. And then drink your coffee later, like hopefully 2 hours later, because then that will set your tone of your day. In the middle of the day, we have sessions that will reboot theta. This is a deep reboot. This is the one we did with the Googlers and Microsoft people that had them getting 26% more work done. It's actually like getting a full sleep cycle, but you get it in 20 minutes. And then at night, we have the nighttime sessions that actually put you into deep sleep, deep delta sleep, that gives you that detox. And what we've done on the app, when they download it for free, there's actually one that says the 21-day quick start. You can just go there, and I've listed out by the day what to do. So if you listen at night, this is a session. If you listen in the middle of the day, do this session. That way you don't even have to think. You can just open up the app, press the button. Now we do have over 2,000 sessions. So if you want to do like the Napoleon Hill sessions, or the power of thinking big, or some of the other ones we have, there are business books that I love that I turned into brain tap sessions. You can also search for them, just put in the field wealth, and you'll see we have about, I think, 47 different books that I've turned into brain tap sessions. Instead of having to read the book, it's kind of like a Reader's Digest version of it, where you get to apply the principles of the book through visualization. Because until you visualize it, it's not real. And a lot of people have read these books, but they're not applying the principles. So what I've done is I put those principles into it.
That's really unique. That's great. Somebody's hearing this right now and they're thinking, I want to take action now. So what's the first brain tap session or tool you recommend? You just said,
there's one that I think go there. We actually have the first session that I have everyone listens to it's a demo session where I explain the technology to them. I explain what's going on, but you get to experience it. I'm actually going to teach you a little bit about visualization and why it's important, because a lot of people don't realize that they're visualizing all the time. Sometimes they're visualizing catastrophe when they should be visualizing success. So we want to teach them the skill of visualization. And also we want to teach you the skill of relaxation, because every cell has piezo energy, meaning it creates energy. And if we don't have a way to dispense that energy, we usually dispense it on our loved ones because they're going to take it back, right? The energy builds up. If we get pulled over, we're not going to get angry at the police officer. We're going to wait till we get home and somebody does something wrong. We're going to, we want to discharge that energy without discharging it on another person. So that's the first step. And then every one of our sessions teach you to do something different, to go deeper into it, to get a deeper result. And most of the ones in this training are all about just improving your life. There's a circle of vitality, we call it in the book, The Brain Fitness Blueprint. And we talk about that. So one could be family, one could be business, one could be career, one could be, there's 9 different fields, and I deal with all of them in there. So basically we want you to be like a wheel rolling. If one of those is out of alignment, you're going to have a little hiccup. So we want to get that all balanced and really take the time for yourself. In the 10-minute ones, we always tell people, don't worry about time. Just set your clock 10 minutes earlier, because if you do that session in the morning, you get the equivalency of 4 hours sleep. So you'll wake up on an up cycle and have energy. The middle of the day is the only one that you have to take time for, because at night, you can play it and go right to sleep. So you don't have to take this takes no time out of your day. You can integrate it into your sleep cycle and get your brain focused and, really invest in yourself. And the app is, like I said, free for 14 days. If they like it, great. If they don't like it on the 13th day, just cancel it. Or before that, if you cancel it, you're still going to get your 14 days. So you can try it out. And the best thing is just try for yourself. I always tell people, do an experiment on yourself, see if it works.
That's great. But you do have to be still. You can't be walking around with it, right?
We do have some walking ones. Kathy Smith, who's an exercise physiologist friend of mine, she's used to be like Tony Robbins. She used to do a lot of Gunther Anker shows and exercise. And she did some walking meditations, and we programmed them with SMR, the sensory motor rhythm, because you can be up walking around doing SMR, sensory motor rhythm. And so we did this for people who were working like with our dementia program. We want to get them up and walking, but a lot of times fear and stress. So we use SMR to get their brain balanced while they're walking. So there are some you can use for walking.
Right. Well, this is to me very exciting and a breakthrough for a lot of people. Again, tell them where they can go.
Yeah. Go to braintap.com and you'll see Try Brain Tap. And you just go there. And when you click on the link, you're going to see where there's an app. And when you download that app, it starts, nobody gets charged to the 14th day. So you can try it for 14 days, download it, use it. Again, if you like it, continue on. If you don't, just cancel it.
Yeah. Doctor, you're really a blessing, and I really appreciate talking. We're going to have you come back and do some more breakdowns, a little more deep dive. But again, thank you so much for everything.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Wow, Dr. Porter, you truly opened our minds today. To all my listeners, you're not stuck with a brain you're born with. You are capable of rewiring your mind for resilience, clarity, and extraordinary leadership. If today's conversation lit a spark in you, go check out Brain Tap and keep an eye out for Dr. Porter's new book, Brain Fitness Blueprint. Remember, it's not just about working harder. It's about working smarter with a brain built for wealth and joy you deserve. Thank you for joining us on Money 911. Until next time, keep your mind sharp, your heart open, and your money working for your happiest life. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithchrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.
Lives inside of